My name is Mason Harrison, and I'm a 32-year-old software engineer from Boston. Growing up, my sister Rachel and I were inseparable after our parents divorced. When she got engaged to Wesley Montgomery, I immediately offered to pay for her dream wedding, all $75,000 of it. I was thrilled to give her this gift until I met Wesley's parents. The moment Harold and Diane Montgomery looked me up and down at our first meeting, I felt something shift. I never imagined my generosity would lead to the most devastating betrayal of my life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever dealt with entitled in-laws or family drama. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this wedding disaster unfolded. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Framingham, Massachusetts, about 30 minutes outside Boston. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. My dad worked as a plumber, and my mom was a nurse at the local hospital. We had a typical middle-class life, camping trips instead of resort vacations, public school instead of private academies, and a small 3-bedroom house that always seemed to need repairs. Everything changed when I was 12 and Rachel was 8. I still remember the night my parents sat us down in the living room. Mom had been crying, her eyes puffy and red. Dad looked defeated, slumped in his chair like someone had let all the air out of him. They told us they were getting divorced. Dad had met someone else, a receptionist at one of his regular commercial clients. Within a month, he moved out and started a new life across town. Mom had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. Suddenly, I found myself making breakfast for Rachel, walking her to and from school, and helping her with homework. I wasn't just her brother anymore. I was the closest thing to a father figure she had day to day. Dad would take us every other weekend, but those visits felt more like obligatory field trips than quality time. His new girlfriend, later wife, made it clear we were baggage from his previous life. Rachel struggled with the divorce more than I did. She was still young enough to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. Watching her realize our family wouldn't be whole again broke my heart. I started doing everything I could to protect her, from bullies at school, from our dad's increasing disinterest, from the harsh realities of our new normal. I'd save my allowance to buy her ice cream after a bad day, or stay up late helping her make a science project because Mom was working nights. Throughout high school, Rachel and I remained close. While most teenagers would be embarrassed to hang out with their younger siblings, I made sure Rachel was included whenever appropriate. My friends knew she was part of the package deal with me, and they accepted her as our honorary little sister. When she had her first heartbreak at 14, it was my shoulder she cried on. When I got accepted to Boston University for computer science, she helped me pack and made me promise to call every week. College was tough financially. I worked 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load. I wanted to make something of myself, to prove that our circumstances wouldn't define us. After graduation, I landed a job at a growing tech company. The hours were brutal, but the pay was good, and there was potential for growth. By 28, I had moved up to lead software engineer, with stock options and a salary that my parents could only have dreamed of. Meanwhile, Rachel followed in Mom's footsteps and became a nurse. She had her own apartment in Cambridge and seemed happy with her career choice. We still had dinner together at least twice a month, and our bond remained as strong as ever. Then came the charity gala 3 years ago. Rachel had been volunteered by her hospital to attend a fundraiser for children's cancer research. She called me the next morning, her voice bubbling with excitement. She'd met someone named Wesley Montgomery, a financial analyst whose father was on the hospital's board of directors. Their connection had been instant, she said. He was charming, educated, and came from a good family, whatever that meant. The first time I met Wesley, I had to admit he seemed like a decent guy. Tall, well-dressed, and articulate, with a firm handshake and good eye contact. He treated Rachel with respect and seemed genuinely interested in her work. When he talked about his job at a prestigious investment firm, There was pride but not arrogance. I approved, and told Rachel as much after he left. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, they were discussing marriage. Rachel called me late one night, squealing with excitement. Wesley had proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. With a diamond ring that must have cost at least 2 months of his salary. She immediately launched into ideas for the wedding, describing the perfect venue, flowers, and dress she'd always dreamed of. I could hear the concern creeping into her voice as she talked about costs. Wesley made good money, but they were saving for a house, and his student loans from his MBA program were substantial. Without hesitation, I made an offer that would change everything. "Let me pay for the wedding, Ratch. All of it." There was silence on the other end. "Mason, that's too much? We're talking about at least $50,000. "I can afford it," I assured her. "I've been saving. And I just got a huge bonus. I don't have a family of my own to spend it on yet. Let me do this for you. You deserve your dream wedding." After some persuasion, she accepted, crying tears of gratitude. "You're the best brother anyone could ask for," she said. "I promise you'll be honored at the wedding. You'll walk me down the aisle since Dad's been so distant. And you'll have the most important speech." At that moment, I felt nothing but joy at being able to give my sister the wedding she deserved. I had no idea that my generosity would eventually be thrown back in my face in the most humiliating way possible. The first sign of trouble came during the engagement dinner at Lavish, an upscale French restaurant in Boston's Back Bay. Rachel had warned me that Wesley's parents were kind of traditional, but nothing prepared me for meeting Harold and Diane Montgomery. Harold was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a perpetual look of mild disappointment. Diane was elegant in that old money way, with a perfectly coiffed bob and subtle jewelry that probably cost more than my car. When Rachel introduced me as her brother who was funding the wedding, Harold's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh? What line of work are you in that allows such generosity?" The way he emphasized the last word made it sound like a character flaw. "I'm a lead software engineer at TechSphere," I replied, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Ah, computers," Diane said with a thin smile. "How contemporary." Throughout dinner, they asked about my education, Boston University, not Harvard like Wesley. My neighborhood, Somerville, which Diane called up and coming, with barely concealed disdain, and my parents' occupations. With each answer, I could feel them mentally downgrading me. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to be patient. The real problems began at our first planning meeting with Cassandra, the wedding planner Rachel had hired with my approval. We gathered at a chic cafe to discuss the guest list. Rachel and Wesley wanted about 150 guests, a reasonable number that would allow for a nice venue while keeping costs manageable. "No." "About the guest list," Diane interjected, pulling out a leather-bound notebook. "I've taken the liberty of drafting our side. We're at 175. Rachel looked startled. "But we agreed on 150 total." "Darling, your father-in-law is a hospital board member. We have social obligations. The Prescotts and the Whitneys simply must be invited, along with the Cunninghams and the Andersons." Wesley nodded along as if this made perfect sense. I noticed Rachel's face fall slightly before she composed herself. "What about Mason's friends?" Rachel asked. "He should be able to invite people too, since he's—" She trailed off as Diane's expression cooled. "Perhaps we should focus on family and close friends," Harold suggested. As if my friends didn't qualify. "After all, we want this to be an elegant affair." I knew exactly what he meant by elegant affair. My friends Trevor, Miguel, and Zach worked as a construction foreman, high school teacher, and chef, respectively. They weren't country club material. "I don't need to invite many people," I said, wanting to ease Rachel's obvious discomfort. "Maybe just 3 or 4 close friends." Diane smiled as if I'd made a joke. Wesley's second cousin Bunny is flying in from London. Surely she takes precedence over casual acquaintances. By the end of that meeting, Wesley's family had commandeered 80% of the guest list. And the venue had been upgraded from the beautiful garden setting Rachel had originally wanted to the much more expensive Fairmont Copley Plaza. Our estimated budget jumped from $75,000 to nearly $95,000. 2 weeks later, the venue was changed again, this time to the even more exclusive Castle Hill on the Crane Estate in Ipswich, adding another $10,000. Then came the flower arrangements, $15,000 instead of $7,000, the designer wedding dress, $12,000 rather than the $3,000 one Rachel had originally fallen in love with, and the 7-course dinner instead of the elegant buffet. Each time I received an update from Cassandra about the escalating costs, I swallowed hard but transferred the money. This was for Rachel, I reminded myself. Her happiness was worth every penny. During a family dinner at Wesley's parents' Beacon Hill brownstone, I finally understood just how deeply the Montgomerys looked down on me. I'd excused myself to use the bathroom and was walking back when I overheard Harold's voice from his study. "The brother is paying for everything, but did you see his shoes? Clearly off the rack. And that watch, I believe it's a Seiko." He chuckled. At least Wesley found the gem in that family. With some polishing, Rachel will integrate well enough. I froze, anger building in my chest. Before I could decide whether to confront him, Rachel appeared in the hallway. "There you are! Dessert's being served." Her eyes searched my face. "Is everything okay?" "Your future father-in-law is a snob," I said quietly. Rachel's smile faltered. "They're just old-fashioned, Mason. They come from a different world. Please don't make this difficult. This marriage is everything to me." I bit my tongue and followed her back to the dining room, where Harold raised his glass in a toast as if he hadn't just insulted me moments before. A week later, I met with Cassandra privately to review the mounting expenses. She looked uncomfortable as she slid the updated budget across the table. $120,000? I stared at the total in disbelief. "The Montgomerys have requested several upgrades," she said diplomatically. "The Champagne Tower alone added $5,000, and the custom dance floor with their monogram is another $7,500. And they haven't contributed a cent, have they?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Cassandra hesitated. "It's not uncommon for the bride's family to cover wedding costs, traditionally speaking. But they're making all the decisions," I pointed out. She didn't disagree, which told me everything I needed to know. I was the ATM, nothing more. Still, I authorized the additional funds. For Rachel, I kept telling myself. Just for Rachel. 6 months before the wedding, I met Jessica, a graphic designer who worked in the same building as my company. Smart, funny, and down-to-earth, she was exactly my type. After a few successful dates, I asked if she'd like to be my +1 for Rachel's wedding. She agreed enthusiastically, saying she loved weddings and couldn't wait to meet my family. When I mentioned Jessica to Rachel over coffee, she seemed pleased for me but hesitant about something. "What is it?" I asked, recognizing her expression. "You're doing that thing with your eyebrows when you're worried." "It's nothing," she said quickly. "I'm just surprised you're bringing someone you've only known for a few weeks to such an important event. If things don't work out, I can always change my RSVP," I assured her. 2 days later, I received a call from Diane Montgomery. I was so surprised to see her name on my caller ID that I almost didn't answer. "Mason," she began without preamble. "Rachel mentioned you're bringing a date to the wedding." "Yes, her name is Jessica," I replied, wondering why this warranted a call. "What does Jessica do for a living? Where did she attend university? Is she from a good family?" I felt my temper rising. "She's a graphic designer. I'm not sure where she went to college, it hasn't come up. And I don't know what you mean by a good family, But she's a good person, which matters more to me. Diane made a small noise of disapproval. The rehearsal dinner will be quite formal at the Algonquin Club. Perhaps you might consider bringing someone more suitable? Someone familiar with the proper etiquette for such settings? I was speechless. Was she actually suggesting I bring a different date? Jessica is my guest, I said firmly. If that's a problem, I'll skip the rehearsal dinner. Oh. There's no need to be dramatic, Diane replied coolly. I merely thought you'd want to make a good impression. After all, many of Harold's colleagues will be there. Important people. After hanging up, I called Rachel immediately. To my dismay, she seemed to share her future mother-in-law's concerns. Mason, please don't be angry. It's just that the rehearsal dinner is really important to the Montgomerys. Maybe you could bring Jessica to the wedding but come solo to the dinner? Just to avoid any discomfort. Discomfort for whom? I demanded. For your wealthy in-laws who might be embarrassed by your blue-collar brother and his date. That's not fair, Rachel protested. But her voice lacked conviction. A week later, I discovered that my childhood friends had been removed from the guest list entirely. Cassandra confirmed this with an apologetic email, saying the final numbers had to be adjusted due to priority relationships. When I confronted Rachel, she blamed venue size limitations. Despite the fact that Wesley's parents had just added 12 more of their acquaintances. The seating chart was the next battleground. Originally, I was supposed to be at the head table with the bridal party. Then I learned I'd been moved to a family table near the front. Finally, Cassandra reluctantly informed me that the latest chart had me seated at table 18, near the back of the ballroom, with distant relatives of Wesley who spoke primarily Portuguese. A language I didn't know. During my suit fitting at an upscale tailor recommended by the Montgomerys, I had the misfortune of running into Harold, who was picking up Wesley's custom tuxedo. As I stood on the platform being measured, Harold glanced at the charcoal gray suit I'd selected. Ah, Mason. Going with something affordable, I see. It's a Tom Ford suit, I replied. Hardly budget. Harold smirked. Yes, well, off the rack. Tom Ford is still off the rack. Wesley's Brioni was handcrafted in Italy. 6 fittings to get it just right. But I'm sure yours will be adequate. As he turned to leave, I overheard him mutter to the shop owner, "It's always obvious when someone didn't grow up learning these things." It wasn't just the wedding that was changing, Rachel was too. The sister who once laughed at pretentiousness was now obsessing over place card calligraphy and whether serving sorbet between courses was 2010. She dropped names of designers I'd never heard of and adopted the Montgomerys' habit of referring to staff by position rather than name. The gardener, the housekeeper. My best friend Trevor noticed it too when he ran into us at a restaurant. Rachel barely acknowledged him, even though he'd been like family when we were growing up. "What's going on with your sister?" Trevor asked afterward. "She looked at me like I was trying to sell her something." "She's turning into a Montgomery," I said bitterly. "Is that what you're paying $120,000 for? To lose your sister to some country club family?" His words hit hard. That night, I went to Rachel's apartment, determined to have an honest conversation. I found her surrounded by wedding magazines, checking items off a monogrammed planner. "We need to talk," I said. "You're changing, and not for the better." Rachel looked up, defensive immediately. "Just because I want a beautiful wedding." "This isn't about the wedding," I interrupted. "It's about you becoming someone who lets people like Harold and Diane dictate who's good enough to be in your life. Someone who would let her brother be disrespected repeatedly by her future in-laws." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Every day, there's some new expectation, some standard I have to meet. Do you know what Diane said when she saw my engagement photos? That my smile showed too much gum and we should consider Botox before the wedding." "Then why are you letting these people control everything?" This isn't your wedding anymore, it's theirs. Rachel broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. Wesley's father is getting him a partnership track at Goldman Sachs. His entire career depends on his parents' connections. If I don't make them happy, if this wedding isn't perfect by their standards, they could take it all away. I was stunned. So Wesley is just going along with all this. He says it's easier to give them what they want. Just for now, until he's established. She looked up at me, pleading. I love him, Mason. And he loves me. We just need to get through this wedding, and then things will calm down. I doubted that very much, but seeing my sister so distraught broke my resolve. What do you need from me? I asked finally. Just step back a little. Let them have their way on the wedding details. Stop questioning everything. Be pleasant to Diane and Harold, even when they're difficult. And in return? Rachel wiped her eyes. In return. I promise this doesn't change anything between us. You're still my brother, my best friend. After the wedding, things will go back to normal. I agreed, not because I believed her, but because I didn't see any other option that wouldn't make her situation worse. I would continue to fund the wedding that was increasingly excluding me, hoping that my sister would find her way back eventually. Little did I know that the worst betrayal was yet to come. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was working late when an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from Cassandra, the wedding planner, with the subject line, Updated Wedding Timeline. I opened it, expecting minor adjustments to the schedule. What I found made my stomach drop. The timeline showed a detailed breakdown of the reception, including dinner, dances, and speeches. The best man's toast was there, along with the father of the bride's speech, given by our uncle since our father had become even more distant after remarrying. And even a brief welcome from Wesley's parents. My name was nowhere to be found. I scrolled through again, thinking there must be a mistake. Rachel had promised me I'd give a speech as the brother of the bride, especially since I was the one who had stepped in to fund the entire event. It had been on every previous version of the timeline. I immediately called Rachel, but the call went to voicemail. I texted her. Just saw the updated timeline. Was my speech removed by mistake? An hour passed with no response. Then 2. Finally. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Wesley, not Rachel. Hey Mason, sorry about the timeline change. My parents thought the speeches were running too long, so we had to cut a few. Nothing personal. Still appreciate everything you're doing. Nothing personal? I was the bride's brother and the person paying for the entire wedding. How was this not personal? I barely slept that night. The next morning, I called Rachel again, and this time she answered, her voice cautious. I was going to call you today, she began, which I knew was a lie. What's going on, Rachel? Why was my speech cut without anyone even discussing it with me? She sighed. It's complicated. The Montgomerys have a certain way they want the reception to flow. Traditional, with just parents and best man/maid of honor speeches. But I'm walking you down the aisle. I'm the closest thing to a father figure you've had since we were kids. And I'm paying for everything. There was a pause. About walking me down the aisle. Uncle Robert will be doing that now. Diane thinks it would look better in the photos to have someone older, more established. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Are you serious right now? You're letting these people dictate who walks you down the aisle? Please try to understand. No. I cut her off. I don't understand. Explain it to me, Rachel. Explain how after everything we've been through together, after I offered to pay over $100,000 for your wedding, you're pushing me aside because some snobs think I'm not good enough. It's not like that, she protested weakly. Then what is it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're ashamed of me. Rachel's voice cracked. Can we talk about this in person? Please? We arranged to meet for dinner that night at a neutral restaurant. I arrived first and ordered a strong whiskey, needing something to steady my nerves. When Rachel walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was highlighted in a way that made her look more like Diane, and she carried herself differently, shoulders back, chin slightly raised. The posture of someone who had been told how to appear important. She sat down across from me, not meeting my eyes. The Montgomerys have certain expectations for their only son's wedding. She began without preamble. I don't care about their expectations, I replied. I care about my sister treating me with basic respect. Rachel flinched. You have to understand, Mason. Wesley's future depends on his parents' connections. They've made it clear that everything needs to be perfect according to their standards. And I don't meet those standards. She didn't deny it, which hurt more than if she had argued. It's not about you personally. It's about appearances. Harold has colleagues and business associates attending who, well, they expect a certain type of wedding. A certain type that doesn't include the blue-collar brother who actually paid for it, I said bitterly. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Wesley received a text from his father yesterday. He said that if certain adjustments weren't made to make the wedding more appropriate, he would withdraw his support for Wesley's partnership track. Do you know what that opportunity means to him? To us? I stared at her in disbelief. So you're willing to humiliate me to secure your fiancé's career advancement? It's not humiliation, she insisted. You'll still be there. You'll still be acknowledged in the program. As what? The wallet that made it all possible? She looked away. Wesley and I are so grateful for your financial support. We truly are. But? I prompted, knowing there was more. Rachel took a deep breath. But the Montgomerys feel that emphasizing your role might make people ask questions about why Wesley's family isn't contributing more. They're concerned about appearances. The truth finally dawned on me. They don't want people to know I paid for the wedding. They want everyone to think they did. Her silence confirmed it. So what exactly is my role supposed to be now? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Rachel fidgeted with her napkin. Just a guest. A regular guest who happens to be my brother. I stood up, throwing money on the table for my untouched meal. No. I won't do it. I won't sit back and pretend to be just another guest at a wedding I paid for while you all cater to the egos of those entitled snobs. Mason, please. Rachel grabbed my arm. I'm begging you. Just go along with this for a few more weeks. After the wedding, things will be different. You're right about that, I said, pulling away from her. Things will definitely be different. That night, we had an emergency family dinner with our parents. Mom was furious when she heard what was happening. Even our normally disengaged father seemed shocked by Rachel's behavior. I didn't raise you to treat family this way, Mom said, her disappointment palpable. Mason has done everything for you since you were little. Rachel sat between our parents, crying quietly. I don't have a choice. The Montgomerys have made it clear that if the wedding doesn't meet their standards, including who plays what role, they'll cut Wesley off completely. No connections. No partnership track, nothing. Then maybe Wesley isn't the right man for you, Mom suggested gently. Anyone who would let his parents dictate something so important. You don't understand. Rachel cried. This is my future. Our future. Wesley promises once they've secured the partnership, we'll have more independence. This is just temporary. I listened silently, my heart breaking as I realized my sister was fully under their influence. When she turned to me, eyes pleading, and asked if I would please just attend as a regular guest with no acknowledgement of my contribution, financial or otherwise, something inside me snapped. I stood up, looking at this stranger wearing my sister's face. I hope the Montgomerys and their connections are worth what you're throwing away, I said quietly, then walked out the door. Behind me, I could hear Rachel breaking down completely, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in our lives, I wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces of her broken heart, because this time she had broken mine. The days after that disastrous family dinner passed in a blur of hurt and anger. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until midnight most nights just to avoid going home to an empty apartment filled with wedding-related emails and voicemails I couldn't bear to check. Trevor came over the weekend after, bringing pizza and beer. "You look like hell," he observed, taking in my unshaven face and the dark circles under my eyes. "Thanks," I muttered, letting him in. "I feel worse." We sat in my living room, the TV on mute, playing a baseball game neither of us cared about. I filled him in on everything that had happened. "So you're still paying for this wedding?" Trevor asked incredulously. "I promised Rachel," I said weakly. "I can't back out now. The deposits are non-refundable anyway." Trevor shook his head. "Man, they're walking all over you. Not just the Montgomerys, Rachel too. The sister I knew would never treat you like this." "That's just it," I said, the realization hitting me anew. "She's not the Rachel I knew anymore. It's like they've brainwashed her. Or maybe she's showing you who she really is when status and money are on the line," Trevor suggested. I didn't want to believe that, but a small voice inside me wondered if he might be right. The next day, I checked my mailbox and found an elegant cream envelope with gold lettering. My formal invitation to the wedding had arrived. I opened it with a sense of dread. "The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Rachel Louise Harrison to Wesley James Montgomery." I stared at the card, noticing how it was addressed. "Mr. Mason Harrison and guest." Not brother of the bride. Not even my full name with middle initial like the other formal invitations I'd seen. Just a generic honorific as if I were a distant acquaintance. I called Cassandra, the wedding planner, desperate for some clarity. "I need to know where I'm actually sitting for the reception," I said after exchanging pleasantries. There was an uncomfortable pause. "Let me check the latest seating chart," she said, the sound of typing in the background. "Ah, here we are. You're at table 23. Table 23? How many tables are there total?" Another pause. 25. I closed my eyes, the humiliation washing over me. "So I'm almost at the back then. Who else is at that table?" More typing. "The Pereira family, they're distant cousins of the Montgomerys from Brazil. And the Wilkinsons, family friends who, I believe they're Wesley's godfather's brother's family. In other words, people I had absolutely no connection to, seated as far from the action as possible without putting me in the parking lot." "I see," I said, my voice hollow. "And this is the final seating arrangement?" "I'm afraid so. It was approved by the Montgomerys yesterday." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Not only had I been demoted from walking Rachel down the aisle, not only had my speech been cancelled, but now I was being physically placed as far away from my own sister as possible on her wedding day. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Please just go along with this for my sake. I promise I'll make it up to you after the wedding." I didn't respond. What was there to say? She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. A week before the wedding, the final indignity arrived in my email inbox. It was a message from Cassandra. "Dear Mason, I regret to inform you that due to space limitations, the rehearsal dinner guest list has been adjusted. Unfortunately, your presence will not be required at this event. Please accept the apologies of the wedding party for any inconvenience." Space limitations? The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Algonquin Club, which could easily accommodate over 100 people. This wasn't about space. This was about erasing me from any meaningful part of the wedding. Before I could process this latest blow, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Harold Montgomery. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mason," Harold's condescending voice filled my ear. "I trust you received the update about the rehearsal dinner." "I did," I replied coldly. Good. Look, I'll be direct. Diane and I feel it might be best if you reconsidered your attendance at the ceremony as well. I nearly dropped the phone. Excuse me? It's nothing personal, Harold continued, as if he weren't suggesting I skip my own sister's wedding. It's just that your presence might create a certain awkwardness. The contrast between your background and the other guests could make things uncomfortable for everyone. You understand, I'm sure. My blood boiled. No, Harold, I don't understand. Perhaps you could explain how my background is a problem at a wedding I'm paying for. Harold cleared his throat. About that. We'd appreciate your discretion regarding the financial arrangements. It would be unseemly for guests to know that Rachel's side couldn't provide properly for her. If anyone asks, we'll say the wedding was a joint effort between families. A joint effort? I repeated incredulously. You haven't contributed a single dollar. Nevertheless, Harold pressed on. We think it best if you send a gift but skip the ceremony. Perhaps you could take a weekend trip? We'd be happy to cover a nice hotel somewhere. In that moment, something inside me broke. The last thread of restraint, of family obligation, of promise-keeping, it all snapped. I'll think about it, I said, my voice suddenly calm. Too calm. Excellent. I knew you'd be reasonable. After hanging up, I sat perfectly still. A plan forming in my mind. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they had no idea what my absence would really mean. I opened my laptop and pulled up all the wedding vendor contracts. As the person who had signed and paid for everything, I had complete access. With methodical precision, I began reviewing the payment schedules, the cancellation policies, and the final payment due dates. What I discovered made a grim smile spread across my face. Most vendors required final payment 3 days before the event. Only 30% had been paid as deposits. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, the photographer, all were awaiting final payment. I picked up my phone and called Trevor. Remember how you said they were walking all over me? I said when he answered. Well, I just found my spine. And they're not going to like what happens next. The morning after Harold's call, I woke up with absolute clarity. If the Montgomerys wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I would make myself truly invisible, along with all the wedding arrangements I had paid for. My first call was to Cassandra. As the wedding planner, she had all the vendor contacts and payment schedules. I needed her cooperation, or at least her information. Mason, she answered, sounding wary. Is everything okay? I need a complete list of all vendors for the wedding, with their contact information and payment status, I said without preamble. May I ask why? Because I'm the one who signed the contracts, and I'm the one paying for everything, I replied evenly. I have a right to that information. There was a pause. The Montgomerys have been making some changes to the arrangements. They've been communicating directly with some vendors. Have they been paying any of the vendors directly? I asked, already knowing the answer. No, Cassandra admitted. All payments are still coming from your accounts. Then I need that list. Now. To her credit, Cassandra didn't argue further. Within 15 minutes, I had a detailed spreadsheet in my inbox listing every vendor, every contract, every payment made and still due. As I suspected, only deposits had been paid. With final payments scheduled for the upcoming week, roughly $85,000 worth. I started with the venue, the majestic Castle Hill on the Crane Estate. According to the contract, I had until Thursday, 3 days before the wedding, to make the final payment of $30,000. If payment wasn't received, they would cancel the reservation and retain only the deposit. I called the venue director, a woman named Eleanor who had been unfailingly polite during our previous interactions. Eleanor, this is Mason Harrison. I'm calling about my sister Rachel's wedding scheduled for this Sunday. Of course, Mr. Harrison. We're finalizing all the details now. It's going to be a beautiful event. That's what I'm calling about, I said, keeping my voice steady. There's been a change of plans. I need to cancel the reservation. There was a shocked silence. Cancel? But the wedding is in 5 days. I'm aware. Unfortunately, the wedding won't be taking place as planned. I wasn't technically lying. The wedding definitely wouldn't be happening as planned. Mr. Harrison, are you certain? This is highly unusual. The couple will forfeit the $10,000 deposit, and at this late date. I understand, I said. I'm the one who paid the deposit. And I accept the loss. Please cancel the reservation effective immediately. Eleanor's professional demeanor faltered slightly. Does the bride know about this cancellation? All parties will be informed, I said vaguely. Please ensure that the venue is locked and unavailable on Sunday. No one should be able to access it, even if they show up claiming there's been a mistake. After finishing with Eleanor, I moved methodically through the list. The caterer, who was expecting a final payment of $22,000, was next. Then the florist, $8,500, the photographer, $5,000, the videographer, $4,200, the DJ, $3,000, the rental company providing tables and chairs, $7,500, and the baker making the 7-tier cake, $2. $800. With each call, I was polite but firm. Some vendors expressed concern, asking if the couple knew about these cancellations. I assured them that all necessary parties would be informed, and reminded them that as the signatory on the contracts and the source of payment, I had the legal right to cancel. A few tried to suggest I was making a mistake or acting in haste. The photographer, a young woman who had seemed genuinely excited about the wedding, was particularly upset. Mr. Harrison, if this is about family drama, maybe take a day to reconsider? These moments can't be recaptured once they're gone. The decision is final. I told her, ignoring the twinge of guilt. Please remove Sunday from your calendar entirely. By late afternoon, I had cancelled every single vendor. Some agreed to refund a portion of the deposits given the unusual circumstances, which I had transferred back to my personal account. Others kept the deposits as per their cancellation policies. In total, I recovered about $18,000 of the $35,000 already paid out. Cassandra called me, her voice tight with panic. Mason, what are you doing? I've been getting calls from vendors all day saying you've cancelled everything. That's correct, I confirmed. The wedding, as planned and paid for by me, is cancelled. But the guests, the couple, everyone is expecting a wedding on Sunday. The Montgomerys made it clear that my presence wasn't required or desired. I explained calmly. If they don't need me there, they don't need my money there either. This is going to be a disaster, Cassandra said, her professional composure cracking. 200 people will show up to a locked venue with no food, no flowers, nothing. That does sound awkward, I agreed. Perhaps Harold can use some of those valuable connections of his to arrange something else in the next few days. Mason, please reconsider. Rachel will be devastated. I felt a pang at the mention of my sister, but hardened my heart. Rachel made her choice. She chose the Montgomerys and their social standing over our relationship. Actions have consequences. After hanging up with a clearly shell-shocked Cassandra, I made one final call to a cabin rental agency in Vermont. I booked a remote property for the weekend, paying extra for one with no cell service or internet. Then I packed a bag with everything I need for a few days of complete isolation. Before leaving, I wrote a brief email to my parents explaining what I had done and why. I didn't go into details about the cancellations, just that I had withdrawn my financial support from the wedding and would be unreachable until Monday. I asked them not to tell Rachel or the Montgomerys where I was going, though I doubted they knew anyway. As a final measure, I turned off my phone completely and removed the battery to ensure I couldn't be tracked or contacted. Whatever chaos was about to unfold, I wanted no part of it. I had spent my entire life protecting Rachel and picking up the pieces when things went wrong. This time, she and her precious future in-laws were on their own. By Wednesday evening, I was on the road to Vermont, a strange mixture of vindication and grief swirling inside me. I had just blown up my sister's wedding and possibly our relationship forever. Yet for the first time in months, I felt like I had stood up for myself, refusing to be used and discarded by people who saw me as nothing more than an open checkbook. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Sunday would come, and 200 finely dressed guests would arrive at a locked venue with no wedding to attend. The thought should have filled me with dread, but instead, I felt a grim satisfaction. No invite, no wedding. It was as simple as that. The cabin in Vermont was exactly what I needed, rustic, isolated, and surrounded by nothing but pine trees and silence. I spent the wedding weekend hiking during the day and sitting by the fireplace at night, deliberately avoiding thoughts of what might be happening back in Massachusetts. By Sunday evening, however, I couldn't help but imagine the scene that had likely unfolded. Guests in formal attire arriving at Castle Hill to find locked gates and confused security guards. The Montgomerys making frantic calls trying to understand what had happened. Rachel in her wedding dress with nowhere to go, and no celebration to have. The image of my sister in distress still pained me, despite everything. We had been through so much together. Had I gone too far? Monday morning, I packed up the cabin, cleaned according to the rental agreement, and began the 3-hour drive back to Boston. Only when I was about an hour from home did I finally reinstall my phone battery and power it on. The device immediately began buzzing uncontrollably. 67 missed calls, 143 text messages, 39 voicemails, emails numbered in the hundreds. I pulled into a rest stop to steel myself before checking any of it. The first message I opened was from Trevor, sent Saturday night. Dude, I don't know if you're getting these, but holy shit. It's complete chaos here. Guests showed up at 3 p.m. and found the place locked tight. The Montgomerys were losing their minds trying to find another venue last minute. Harold almost had a heart attack when he found out everything was cancelled. Rachel was crying in her wedding dress on the steps outside. Wesley's family is blaming her for choosing an irresponsible brother. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but with really expensive clothes. There were several more messages from Trevor describing the scene in vivid detail. The guests huddled in confusion, checking their invitations to confirm they had the right date and location. Harold shouting into his phone trying to leverage his connections to find an alternative venue. Diane having what appeared to be a nervous breakdown as she realized her son's perfect society wedding was imploding. Wesley standing shell-shocked, unable to process what was happening. The most devastating messages were from Rachel. They started with pure rage. How could you do this to me? This was supposed to be the most important day of my life. Then came the bargaining. Please, Mason, if you're seeing this, we can fix this. Please call me back. We can reschedule everything. We'll give you the recognition you deserve. Just please don't let it end this way. And finally, around 2 a.m. on what should have been her wedding night, the heartbreak. I've lost everything. Wesley's parents blame me for your actions. They say I should have controlled you better. Wesley isn't standing up for me. My wedding day was spent crying in a hotel room instead of dancing at my reception. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. But the worst part is, I'm not sure I can forgive myself either. I chose them over you, and in the end, I lost everyone. My mother had left several voicemails, her tone evolving from shocked, Mason, what have you done? To concerned, please call us, we're worried about you. To a strange, quiet understanding in her final message. I don't condone how you handled this, but I understand why you did it. Rachel needs to learn that loyalty goes both ways. Call when you're ready. We love you. Even my father, who had been largely absent from our lives for years, had texted. Extreme move, son. Can't say I would have done differently. Let me know if you need anything. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, reading through the digital wreckage of what I had done. There was a part of me that felt vindicated. The Montgomerys had finally faced consequences for their arrogance and entitlement. But there was also an ache in my chest when I thought about Rachel, who had been caught in the middle of it all. When I finally pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, I was emotionally exhausted. I just wanted to shower and sleep in my own bed. But as I approached my door, I found Rachel and Wesley sitting on the floor in the hallway, waiting for me. Rachel looked nothing like the polished, Montgomery-approved version of herself from recent months. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt I recognized from her college days. Wesley looked equally disheveled, his designer clothes wrinkled as if he'd been wearing them for days. They both stood when they saw me. For a moment, nobody spoke. "How did you know I'd be back today?" I finally asked. "Mom," Rachel admitted. "She wouldn't tell us where you were. But she said you'd booked the cabin until Monday morning. I unlocked my door and gestured for them to come in. Whatever was about to happen, I didn't need my neighbors witnessing it. Once inside, Rachel didn't waste time. "You destroyed everything," she said, her voice hoarse. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" "I think I do," I replied calmly. "I gave you exactly what the Montgomerys wanted, a wedding without me involved. By ruining it completely, 200 people showed up to nothing. Do you know how humiliating that was? Almost as humiliating as being uninvited from my sister's wedding after paying over $100,000 for it," I countered. "Almost as humiliating as being told my background made me unsuitable to attend." Wesley, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "My parents were wrong," he said, surprising me. "What they did, what we all did, to you was inexcusable." Rachel looked at him sharply, as if this was a new development. "After everything fell apart on Sunday," Wesley continued, "I had a lot of time to think. My parents were blaming Rachel, saying she should have managed you better. As if you were a problem to be controlled, not a person who deserved respect. That's when I realized what kind of people they really are. And what kind of person I've become." Rachel added quietly, "I studied my sister," seeing glimpses of the Rachel I knew beneath the pain and exhaustion. "What happens now?" I asked. Rachel took a deep breath. "Wesley broke off the engagement last night." This genuinely shocked me. "What? Why?" Wesley ran a hand through his hair. "Because she defended you. After everything, when my parents were saying terrible things about you and your family, Rachel finally stood up to them. She said she'd been wrong to let them dictate the terms of our wedding and our life. My father said if she felt that way, perhaps she wasn't Montgomery material after all. And I said maybe I didn't want to be." Rachel finished. That's when Wesley told his parents he was done letting them control his life through their connections and money. He quit his job this morning. I looked between them, trying to process this unexpected turn. "So you're not getting married?" "Not now," Wesley said. "Maybe not ever. We both need to figure out who we are without my parents' influence." Rachel stepped forward hesitantly. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Mason. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let people treat you terribly because I was scared of losing the future I thought I wanted. I betrayed the one person who has always been there for me." Her words hung in the air between us. I wanted to still be angry, to hold on to the hurt and betrayal, but seeing my sister, my real sister, not the Montgomery-approved version, broke something loose inside me. "It's going to take time," I said finally. "I can't just pretend none of this happened." "I know," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. More sorry than I've ever been about anything in my life." After they left, I spent weeks processing everything that had happened. Rachel and I began the slow work of rebuilding our relationship, starting with weekly coffee meetings that were awkward and painful at first, gradually becoming more comfortable as we found our way back to some version of the closeness we once had. 6 months later, Rachel had moved to Chicago for a fresh start, taking a nursing position at a prestigious hospital where she could advance on her own merits. Wesley had found a job at a smaller financial firm where his last name didn't matter. They were dating again, but taking things slowly, building a relationship based on who they actually were rather than who his parents wanted them to be. As for the Montgomerys, they had become social pariahs in certain circles after the wedding debacle. It turned out that treating people poorly and flaunting wealth and status only worked when everything was going your way. When disaster struck, the same people they looked down on were quick to gossip and gloat about their downfall. 1 year after the wedding, Rachel invited me to dinner at her new apartment in Chicago. To my surprise, she had invited our parents as well, and Wesley, who was now working in the same city. It wasn't quite a family reunion. Too much had happened for things to ever be exactly as they were before, but it was a new beginning. Over dessert, Rachel raised her glass in a toast. "To my brother Mason," she said, her eyes meeting mine across the table, "who taught me the hard way that true family stands by you not when it's convenient or prestigious, but when it matters most. I'm sorry I had to lose you to understand how much you mean to me." I raised my glass in return, feeling the last of my anger finally dissolve. "To second chances?" I replied. "And to knowing your own worth." Later that year, Rachel and Wesley did get married, in a simple ceremony in our mother's backyard with fewer than 50 guests. I walked my sister down the aisle as originally planned, and gave a heartfelt speech at the reception that left few dry eyes. The entire event cost less than $5,000. And Rachel said it was more meaningful than the lavish production the Montgomerys had tried to orchestrate. The most important lesson I learned from this whole ordeal was that self-respect isn't negotiable. For years I had defined my worth through what I could do for others, especially Rachel. I thought sacrifice was the ultimate expression of love. But there's a difference between generous sacrifice and allowing yourself to be exploited and discarded. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to set boundaries and stand firm when they're crossed. Real relationships, whether family, romantic, or friendship, are built on mutual respect. Without that foundation, no amount of money, status, or connection can create something genuine and lasting. So, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have canceled the wedding, or found another way to handle the betrayal? Have you ever had to stand up to family who were treating you poorly? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need a reminder about the importance of self-respect and healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most necessary growth.